Ah, Vivian, a Kim mandou parabéns pelos convites. Que ela achou que ficaram muito lindos.
Ai, obrigada. Não falo bastante.
I just told Vivian, Kim, I just told her that you said the publicity material for today was good, that you'd liked it.
Oh,
I
it was
didn't actually.
great.
I don't make these. She does. Vivian does. She's the genius behind it all.
Everybody liked it. Everybody liked it.
Excellent.
Yeah, I got a lot of hits on it, and you know, it's funny how Facebook has been really integral to everybody during this.
Yeah.
It's been really. Sometimes it's yeah. There's so much correspondence to do, like emailing and just a lot of stuff, a lot of things. So it's filled with stuff. Well.
Bom. E já conseguiu já ver o link do Face? Não consegui me dizer aí.
We're just setting up the live streaming to Facebook, and then we'll be starting.
Oh, okay, great. Fantastic.
Encontrei, Bruna. Só pegar o link certinho aqui.
Where is Kim?
I'm Kim.
Obrigada.
Onde que ela está?
She asks where you are.
Oh, I'm in Manhattan, in New York City. I'm in Harlem.
Nice.
Ah,
That's where I lived for 39 years.
Wow.
In the same apartment in Harlem for 39 years.
Oh wow.
I'm from Brooklyn. So I grew up in Brooklyn until I was 20. And then I moved to Manhattan. And then I moved to France. And then I moved here.
Wow.
Yeah, right after college.
Wow, wonderful. Madi, ela tá morando em Harlem, em Nova York, já tem 39 anos, tá desde esse tempo todo no mesmo apartamento. E antes disso, ela cresceu em Brooklyn, que é outra região da cidade de Nova York, né? E ela morou na França também, quando ela foi estudar com a Maurice Salar.
But I married a Greek person. And so we also have a world over in Greece on a tiny little island. And that's where I get my cane. I bring my cane from, that's an interesting story that maybe we should save for,
yes, please,
for this meeting.
I adore that story.
Yeah. That's what I do.
That's a really great story. A história da cana a cana é dela, gente, vocês não vão acreditar, não. A cana mais maravilhosa do mundo, a proveniência mais incrível. Vocês não vão acreditar mesmo, não. Vivian, estamos online no Facebook? Já pode soltar? Já vamos?
Sim, tudo certo, gente.
Elione, Mauro, Formiga, Diogo, boa tarde.
Boa tarde.
Tem mais gente, eu só não estou vendo. Quem não tem câmera aberta, eu não estou conseguindo ver.
Boa tarde, pessoal.
Boa tarde.
Cadê Bruna? Desligou a câmera.
Peraí, só um minuto, gente.
Não, tá. Alguém tá com ruído alto aí no fundo, não sei. Kim, there's quite a bit of noise coming in. I'm not sure if it's your microphone or somebody else's.
You know what I'm going to do? Oh yes, let me see if this works better, okay? Let me try this.
Vamos começar, pessoal?
Can you hear it better now?
No, it's fantastic. That's great.
Because I tell you, we're having tropical storms.
Oh!
So that's the rain.
Oh my! Era a chuva. Tempestade tropical aí em Nova York. Olha que peculiar. Right.
Vamos começar?
For 2 days.
Vamos. All right, Ron, for real.
Okay.
Boa tarde, pessoal. Vamos colocar seus microfones aí no mudo. Deixa eu conferir aqui de todo mundo antes da gente começar. Chegou Irã.
Oba!
Pronto, vamos começar.
Ok.
Boa tarde a todos. Mais uma live aqui do Corona Bassumas. Sejam todos bem-vindos. Meu nome é Bruna Bonfim, eu sou de João Pessoa, trabalho aqui na Orquestra Sinfônica Municipal de João Pessoa e sou professora de fagote no Projeto Prima, aqui na sala comigo para receber as perguntas de vocês e enviar para a KT. Estamos eu e a Vivian, que Vivian é academista da USESP. Boa tarde, Vivian.
Boa tarde, Bruna. Boa tarde, gente.
Lá no Facebook, a gente está com Isaac, que vai enviar as perguntas do Facebook para a gente, e Luiz Henrique, que nos ajuda no compartilhamento das nossas publicações nas redes sociais, né, para a gente ter o máximo de alcance possível, né? E aqui, mais uma vez hoje, a gente está com Caterine Carrian, ela que é a primeira fagotista da Orquestra Filarmônica de Minas Gerais, e a nossa tradutora aqui de inglês, francês, né, Caterine? Boa tarde, Caterine, dê as boas-vindas por nós, a nossa convidada de hoje.
Boa tarde, Bruna. Boa tarde, todo mundo. Hi, Kim. How are you today?
Hi, everybody. Hello. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited about it.
Então, a Kim falou boa tarde para todo mundo e disse que está muito feliz de estar com a gente. Vamos nessa. Kim, how did you start playing the bassoon?
Well, I was already studying music, piano, since the age of 4 or 5. But I loved music, but I was not really into the piano. So when I went to middle school, I had to take an orchestral instrument, and my mother and sister sat me down in the kitchen and said, you have to pick oboe or bassoon. Nobody's going to play those instruments, so you'll have more of a chance to perform. Now,
Excellent.
also, I had a lot of music. I was always going to concerts. My mother took me to concerts since I was 5. I saw the Bolshoi Ballet. I saw Maya Plitzskaya dance at the Bolshoi Ballet in the Old Met when I was 5.
Wow.
So I had this, I saw all the great pianists by the time I was 9. That was just, wasn't allowed to listen to rock and roll until I was in the 4th grade.
Right.
And so I took the bassoon, and as soon as I played one note on the bassoon, that was it. I never studied anything in school after that. Only music. I knew 11 years old, it was like that, a trajectory of the bassoon.
Wow, very cool. Então, gente, a Kim, ela começou a estudar música quando era muito novinha. Ela tinha 4, 5 anos, já estudava piano. E, bom, a mãe dela era de uma família bem musical, a mãe dela levava para concertos, para ver o balé, também ela viu o Bolshoi quando era pequenininha, ela já tinha visto todos os grandes pianistas, até a idade dos 9 anos já tinha visto vários recitais de pianistas famosos. E aí, quando mudou do ensino fundamental para o ensino médio, lá, que começa lá pelos 11, 12 anos, ela teve a obrigação de escolher um instrumento de orquestra. E aí a mãe e a irmã, né, pegaram ela pela mão, sentaram ela na cozinha e disseram, filha, você vai tocar fagote ou oboé, porque como ninguém vai querer tocar esses instrumentos, você vai ter uma chance melhor de você se dar bem. Então pronto, escolheu o fagote e daí para frente, quando ela tocou o fagote pela primeira vez, já se apaixonou e foi isso. E outro detalhe interessante, né, na casa dela, ela foi proibida de escutar rock and roll até os 9 anos de idade. Não era permitido. Ok, Kim.
Yeah.
So then you picked the bassoon when you were what, 12 years old, more or less?
Yeah, 11 or 12. I think I was 11 because had already skipped a grade. And the reason I was in the instrumental program, so I wouldn't skip another grade. And also I could take instrumental music that way.
Right, right. Então, ela escolheu o fagote quando tinha 11 anos, porque ela pulou um ano. E o motivo pelo qual ela estava nos programas de artes, de música na escola, era para impedir ela de pular mais um ano. Né? Mulher muito inteligente, menina muito inteligente, tinha que ter alguma coisa para manter ela interessada na escola. Ela até comentou antes, no trecho anterior, que eu esqueci de traduzir, que depois que ela começou a tocar fagote, ela não estudou mais nada na escola, só foi o fagote. So you stopped studying anything other than the bassoon in school after you started playing?
I was so bad in school. Really bad. And the thing is, I was, I just, it was just, but for me, since a very early age, it was just music, maybe as soon as I could work a record player myself, I was always, my grandparents were musicians, my mother and father. So, yeah, they were musicians. And so my mother, even because she grew up in the Depression, they had no money. She couldn't go to college or anything like that. But she was very interested in art, literature, and music. So that was like the most important thing to her. So, it was just, we were a working class family. My father was a bricklayer. My father didn't graduate high school. He had to support the rest of his family. And my mother's family, they both came from divorced parents, and then in the Depression, that was weird. And they were mixed religions. My father was Catholic, my mother was Jewish. So that was hard for them to be married, but they were accepted by my mother's family. My father was accepted totally.
Right.
My mother, not so much by my father's family, but these were times everybody was very poor. It was cataclysmic, the Depression.
Of course.
So they didn't, so we were, when it came
Boa
to
tarde a todos.
when it came to buy my bassoon, then that was, a big thing, but they did it. Yeah, they did it. They got it.
Fantastic.
They helped me. I mean, I also worked a job so that I could also put some money onto it also. Yeah.
Ok, cool. Let me translate that. Então, ela conta um pouquinho da proveniência, né, da história da família dela, né? Ela soube muito cedo que ela queria ser musicista, né? Desde pequenininha, assim, que ela conseguiu fazer funcionar, né, uma vitrola sozinha, já sabia que tudo que ela queria fazer na vida era música. Isso vem dos avós. Os avós dela eram músicos. E os pais dela cresceram na Depressão, né, nos anos 30, 40. Todo mundo era muito pobre naquela época e, assim, não era uma possibilidade para famílias de classe média de poder estudar muito. Então, o pai dela não graduou, né, não se formou do ensino médio, ele era pedreiro. A mãe dela também, né, uma juventude bem difícil, e se casaram, e foi um casamento bem complicado, assim, porque eles vinham de famílias divorciadas, então os avós já dela eram divorciados, coisa que não era comum na época, e então, assim, a estrutura familiar bem diferente, e era foi um casamento interreligioso. O pai dela era católico e a mãe era judia, então, assim, as famílias se estranharam um pouquinho, acabou que a família da mãe dela aceitou bem o pai, mas o contrário, nem tanto. Então, foi uma situação um pouco difícil. E, como eu disse, eram muito pobres e era difícil, né? classe média, trabalhadores e tal, e quando veio o tempo de comprar um fagote, foi um evento bem marcante para a família dela, e todo mundo trabalhando para isso, ela também trabalhando para juntar um dinheiro para comprar o primeiro instrumento. Okay,
Yeah.
so you bought your bassoon.
Yeah. Well,
When did you manage to buy a bassoon?
okay, so like my situation with bassoons led me to meet people that really were very influential in my life. So the first bassoon I bought, my parents bought me, was a bassoon that was manufactured by a former principal bassoonist of the New York Philharmonic, William Polisi. It was a Polisi bassoon. And then I had to get a better bassoon when I was going to a special high school here for music, a public school. And then I was going to Juilliard after that. So I needed a good instrument. My teacher, who was going to be my teacher in Juilliard, Harold Goltzer, found a bassoon. It was a 10,000 series. Well, it turned out to be stolen from Gerald Corey.
No way.
Yes, it's very interesting. So that is how I developed one of my great friendships with Gerald Corey. It's a reason why I feel very connected to Canada because of this. And it led me even to the students that I'm teaching now and the people who I'm becoming friends with or have direct relationships with. So, okay, so maybe you want to explain up to there about the...
Of course.
Yeah, yes, because then it gets even a little bit more interesting after that.
That is stunning. That is absolutely stunning. Então, ela teve que comprar, no primeiro fagote que os pais dela compraram para ela, era um Polisi. E tinha sido fabricado pelo próprio William Polisi, que tinha sido o fagotista na... Which orchestra was he principal?
He was principal of the New York Philharmonic in the 1950s.
Okay.
And he
era...
with Metropolis, the famous conductor.
Ok, o William Polisi, ele foi primeiro fagotista da Filarmônica de Nova York sob o Metropolis. Então, bom, esse fagote, né, foi o primeiro dela, e depois, quando chegou a hora dela entrar na Juilliard, ela precisava de um instrumento melhor, e o Harold Goltzer, que ia ser o professor dela, procurou e encontrou um Heckel 10.000, né? Um Heckel 10.000, que acontece que havia sido roubado do Gerald Corey, que era o professor em Montreal na época. E, bom, ela vai contar um pouco dessa história, mas eu estou muito espantada, porque, né, eu conheci o Gerald Corey, ele ainda dava aula no conservatório em Montreal quando eu estudei lá. Eu não sei se o Michel está aqui hoje, mas talvez ele tenha alguma coisa para contar dessa história. This is really amazing, Kim, because when I studied at Conservatoire in Montreal, I met Gerald Corey. He was still teaching at the conservatory there when I was studying with Michel Bété. So there's another connection to Gerald Corey for you.
Well, let me tell you that I had many, many experiences in my life were either directly related to Gerald Corey, but it starts here. So we had to give that bassoon back so we could get our money back because it was $2,000. And at that time, $2,000 was the entire year of tuition at Juilliard.
Yeah.
So we gave it back so that we could get our money back. But I had to call Jerry first, and I told him, this is how I met Jerry on the phone, telling him that the bassoon belonged to him. It was some instrument repairman in New York City told me that the serial numbers had been tampered with, and it really was 10954 or something like that. It was stolen out of Corey's car. Jerry was always messing up bassoons with cars. So that's a whole other story. And you have to remind me to tell you another story about Jerry Corey and cars. But they'll come later because chronologically we have to stay. Okay. So I gave that bassoon back and I became friends with Jerry.
Excellent.
So that started, and he helped me so much later on because of Maurice Allard and French bassoon. But we haven't gotten there yet. I just have to go through how I got my Heckel that I own now, which is, I'm seeing somebody in a picture having a bassoon that looks like mine in one of these pictures. And I have to show you my bassoon because this is my bassoon. And as you can see, it's got this reddish color, right? Actually, in the slide, it looks a little orange, but it's actually a little redder. Okay. Somebody who I saw having their bassoon in a picture had a bassoon that looked like that. And I'm wondering
see,
if
who
it's
is it?
also an 11,000.
I don't know.
Now they don't have a picture. Maybe they went off for a little while.
They
Okay.
probably went off cam
So-
for a bit.
So my teacher, Harold Goldser, said in 1972, order a new Heckel from the Heckel factory. So we ordered it. And 2 years later, I was at Tanglewood, and Sherman Walt, the famous bassoonist from the Boston Symphony, he was the principal, was coaching me. I was playing a bassoon, a 6000 series that the Juilliard School owned while I was waiting for my bassoon. So he said to me, that just has two more sentences. He said to me, "It sounds great, dear, but you need a new bassoon." And that night, my mother called me up and said, "The bassoon is here."
Incredible. Very good. Então, o que aconteceu? Né? Descobriram que esse fagote que o Harold Goldser tinha arrumado para ela, e eles tinham comprado de um luthier, um cara que arrumava fagotes na cidade de Nova York, havia sido roubado. Aí né, descobriram que alguém tinha tentado tampar modificar o número de série do fagote e tudo mais, e descobriram que havia sido roubado de Gerald Corey. Então a Kim, ela conheceu o Gerald assim, né, telefonando para ele, passando telefonema, falou: "Oi, sou eu, Kim Laskowski, eu moro em Nova York, acabei de comprar um fagote, acontece que eu sei o que roubaram de você. Então vou devolver esse fagote para o senhor." E então, acabou devolvendo, né, o instrumento para o Gerald Corey, e assim que ela se tornou amiga dele. E devolveram, né, para conseguir ter o dinheiro de volta, porque era $2.000 na época, e correspondia a um ano inteiro de anuidade da Juilliard. Aí devolveram para ter o dinheiro de volta. Foi assim que ela se tornou amiga do Gerald, e ela vai contar mais sobre o Gerald Corey depois, que ele ajudou ela muito com outros instrumentos, também na aventura na França com Maurice Allard. Aí, em 1972, o professor dela na Juilliard falou: você vai precisar encomendar um Heckel, encomenda um Heckel que você vai precisar. Aí pronto, enquanto estava esperando esse Heckel chegar, ela tocou num 6.000, com um instrumento bem antigo, né, da Heckel. The 6,000s, Kim, what year are they, more or less? What period are they?
In more late 20s or early 30s.
Right.
You know, I think late 20s, early 30s.
Ok. Então, ele tocava um instrumento, o Heckel, da série 6.000, que havia sido fabricado nos anos 20 ou 30, né? E aí ela estava em Tanglewood em 1974, tendo aula com Sherman Walt, que era o fagotista em Boston, e ele falou para ela: "Não, tá soando super bem, querida, seu som tá lindo, tá muito bonito, só que você vai precisar de um instrumento novo." E naquela noite, a mãe dela ligou para conversar com ela, falando: "Seu fagote chegou." So your bassoon arrived.
That's right. It arrived. It took 2 years.
That's serendipitous.
Yes. So I drove down and I got it because it's only a 3-hour drive. I had a car that year. I had a car. And
Nice.
I drove back up the next morning, and then I played that bassoon let's see, I was 19. So like a lot of years, you know, I don't know, 50 years, almost 50 years, right?
Yeah,
No,
something like that.
something for
45.
45
Yeah,
years,
40
45
something.
years, almost
Yep.
45 years, except for a few years when I played the French bassoon. That bassoon I gave to somebody to play in the Orchestre de Paris, so that, because it was still being broken in, you know. I
Right.
gave it to Amaury Valès to play it in the Orchestre de Paris while I was just
Okay.
playing the buffet.
Right. So how was that? How did you decide to suddenly go to France and play the French bassoon?
Right. So when I was 15, well, you know, I never really liked to listen to records of the bassoon. It didn't live up to what I wanted to hear
Mm-hmm.
because there weren't that many really good recordings of bassoonists. I mean, now it's like I love everything, but at that time, I liked Leonard Sharrow a bit. I still do. But a friend of mine played a recording that he got it at a record store for a quarter. You know, you could buy those Nonsuch and Turnabout records. And
Yeah.
it was the Vivaldi E minor bassoon concerto. And it was with Maurice Allard. And like I said, oh, wow. I said, the sound is a little weird, but it was the musicality that just, you know, well, then I got to love the sound so much because he has the most beautiful sound. So I said, that's it. I was 15 years old. I was a junior in high school. I said, it's my goal to get to that guy. And I did get to him and to go study with him.
Fantastic.
But I had,
Oh, wonderful.
yeah. So so I don't know if you want me to keep going. Let me just go to the end of that.
Yes, please.
When I was in college, I went on a tour with this woodwind quintet, and we were in Paris, and I took the train out to Maurice Allard's house and just went into his house and played for him. And they said, I want to study with you. And he said, okay,
Wow.
but you have to get a French bassoon. And he said, why don't you get in touch with Gerald Corey? He was great friends with Gerald Corey at that time. I mean, he's always been great friends with Gerald Corey.
Excellent, excellent. Então, estúdio do Maurice Allard. E é uma história meio complexa, né? Conseguiu esse fagote, né? Esse fagote Heckel novo e tal, tocou com ele durante um tempo, e aí eu perguntei como é que ela chegou no fagote francês. E acontece que ela não gostava de ouvir muito gravações de fagote na época, ela só gostava de ouvir o Leonard Sharrow, e ela descobriu o Maurice Allard através de um amigo dela que tinha comprado na loja de discos, assim, um disco meio perdido por 25 centavos. Comprou um disco assim, e era um disco do concerto em Mi menor do Vivaldi, tocado pelo Maurice Allard. E ele colocou para ela ouvir, e ele ficou assim... We've lost you, Kim. Are you still here? Okay, there you are. Ela ficou assim... muito, muito impressionado com o som, né? Achou o som um pouco estranho. Disse, nossa, que som é esse? Que som de fagote diferente, mas que musicalidade. Achou maravilhoso. Aí, daí para frente, ela tinha 15 anos. Aí daí para frente, o objetivo dela era ir estudar com o Allard mesmo. Então, alguns anos depois de ter ouvido aquele disco, eu estava na Juilliard já e fazendo uma turnê com o Quinteto de Sopros, uma turnê na França. E ela aproveitou a oportunidade, pegou um trem e foi parar na casa do Maurice Allard e arranjou uma aula com ele e tocou um pouco para ele e tal, e falou, ó, eu quero ser sua aluna. Aí ele falou, tudo bem, ok, mas você vai ter que tocar fagote francês. Conversa com o Gerald Corey para ver como é que faz isso. Então foi assim que ela estabeleceu de novo esse contato com o Gerald Corey para conseguir estudar com o Maurice Allard. So he told you to go to Gerald Corey.
Yeah, he said, look, you know, you're gonna order go to the Buffet Factory and order a bassoon. And I did that the next day. course. What he does, I say, right? So, and then he said, and then go take some lessons with Gerald Corey. Gerald Corey brought the bassoon back from France for me, dropped it off in New York. And then my mother used to take me up to Ottawa, you know. So I was studying with Jerry, the French bassoon. And then in 1976, the Paris Opera came to New York as a present for the bicentennial, 1976. The Paris Opera came, and Allard gave me lessons while he was in the 2 weeks he was here in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Plus and that's where William Polisi comes in, because Joe Polisi, his son, also was a friend of Allard's. He was at that time president of Yale Music School.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very close with Maurice Allard, and Joe drove the wind section from the Paris Opera out to my parents' house in Brooklyn, and my mother made dinner for all of them.
Oh, yay.
So
Nice.
that was intense, right? So, and then and when I graduated with a master's in Juilliard, I applied for a Fulbright scholarship, and then I got into the French Conservatory, and I studied the French bassoon with Maurice Allard.
Okay, nice. I think that's a good chunk
Yes,
to translate. Então, quando ela foi conhecer o Allard na casa dele, ele falou para ela, você vai encomendar, então, você vai lá na fábrica da Buffet, você vai encomendar um fagote francês. E ela fez isso. No dia seguinte, estava na fábrica encomendando um buffet. Aí, no que demorou para o instrumento ficar pronto, ela já tinha voltado para os Estados Unidos, e quem trouxe esse fagote francês para ela foi o Gerald Corey, né? Numa viagem, ele pegou lá e deixou com ela lá em Nova York, foi embora para Ottawa, onde ele morava, e aí, a partir desse momento, a Kim ficou indo e voltando de Nova York para Ottawa. Deve ser, assim, dirigindo de carro, deve dar umas 10 horas. How long does it take to go up from New York? Eles foram desenvolvendo uma amizade assim, né? Porque ela ia de carro, ele vinha, e eram, assim, conversas longas. Ele era famoso, o Gerald, ele era muito famoso por dar aulas de 5 horas para todo mundo, assim. Ele era fantástico. Então, ela ficou assim, estudando fagote francês com ele, meio que à distância, tendo que viajar e tudo mais. E em 1976, a Opéra de Paris foi para Nova York, como um presente do bicentenário da cidade de Nova York. Não da cidade, não, mas da cidade de Nova York, bicentenário da independência dos Estados Unidos. E durante essas 2 semanas que a orquestra ficou em Nova York, ela teve aulas com o Maurice Allard. E o Joe Polisi, que era o filho do William Polisi, ele é muito amigo também do Maurice Allard. Então, ele resolveu pegar o naipe de fagotes ou de madeiras, não sei se eu entendi direito. Was it the woodwinds, the whole woodwinds?
Yeah, like they were, like, my goodness, you know, I mean, all the famous guys at Maxence Larieux from that time, and also Pierre Pierlot and a bunch of guys. There were at least 10 of them. I mean, well, maybe wow. seven or 8, yeah. But, yeah.
Então, o Joe Polisi resolveu pegar todo mundo
They came in
do naipe de madeiras. Do naipe de madeiras e levou todo mundo para casa dos pais da Kim. Eles foram de táxi, né, dividindo um comboio de táxi. Todo mundo foi lá para jantar na casa da Kim, e os pais, a mãe da Kim que fez o jantar para todo mundo. Aí, muitas amizades, assim, surgindo. Right, so they all went over to your mother and father's house, and your mom cooked for everybody.
She did.
Fantastic.
She did. And then we also, people from my quintets, we also played for them, you know, but they had met them. I mean, Maurice Allard had met them all because I brought them all with me when I went to meet him in 1975. We just trekked over to his house in the suburbs of Paris. It was like, I don't know if anything like that had happened to him before. He was a pretty, he was an interesting guy. Let me tell you that. But he was just, you know, I mean, he has always been my muse, you know. I mean, even till now, for me, French woodwind playing is it, as far as I'm concerned. And they developed wood, you know, the great virtuosos. The greatest part of our literature is that our American players and North American players have been most widely influenced by the French.
Right, right.
Totally.
Então, tá explicando um pouquinho como que foi essa viagem, voltando um pouquinho na viagem para a França, que ela fez com o Quinteto de Sopros, né? Esse mesmo Quinteto de Sopros estava lá na casa da mãe dela quando o Naipe de Madeiras foi jantar, né? E ela só falando um pouco do Maurice Sarlat, né? Falando que ele era uma figura bem peculiar e que para ela o estilo de tocar instrumentos de madeira, música francesa, tudo que é a atual escola americana, norte-americana de tocar instrumentos de madeira vem daí, né? Vem do Maurice Sarlat e da turma dele. Right.
And I want to say that but like I mentioned Leonard Sharrow before. Leonard Sharrow was probably our greatest from that generation of like the early Big Five symphonies. He was the greatest bassoonist of the Big Five in the 1950s. And all the recordings of him with the Chicago Symphony are examples of just greatness. He started on the French bassoon, and he was studying with Louis Letellier. The son of Louis Letellier was the teacher. Now, I'm going to show you guys a picture of this guy. This was this guy. Can you see it?
Yeah.
And he has a French bassoon in his hand. This is from a newspaper. His name was Ariel Del Busto. He was a bassoonist from Puerto Rico. And he studied with Letellier. He was a very well-known freelancer at the time. And so he started he was originally a French bassoonist. Also, let's talk about teachers like Petsy. Petsy was the teacher of Van Hosen, who taught Judy and Steve Paulson. Petsy had a bassoon. Petsy switched. All of these guys switched to German bassoon, but some of them had a dual system, which was called World System bassoon. Yep. Now, one of my students just bought Petsy's bassoon that had been converted to a full German system, but you could see the remnants of the world. It's an 8,000 series. Now, Petsy originally played on the French system, but you can hear the influence of the teachers who had originally played French bassoon and switched, had something really in their sound, and they definitely translated it to their teachers, to their students.
That's really interesting. I had no idea that the French bassoon had this much influence in New York, in the United States at the beginning, in the middle of the century.
This guy, first of all, in his review, in one of his reviews, it said, he gave a recital. He was a big recitalist. He said, it's the loudest bassoon we ever heard. But the funny thing is that his bassoon got run. This is two things I want to talk about. Running over the bassoon with vehicles.
Ew, ow. Okay.
Ayel's bassoon was on a trolley, got run over by a trolley. And the bassoon got dug into the asphalt and the keys are sticking out.
No.
And he switched to German. He took that opportunity to switch to the German bassoon.
Oh man, wow.
Because Kovar had come in from Lithuania, and he started teaching at Juilliard. He was the second bassoonist of the New York Philharmonic. Kovar is the father-in-law of Norman Hertzberg.
Yeah.
And but Kovar was a great teacher. and he trained people. He trained a whole bunch of 1915 bassoonists, and yeah, so.
Incredible. Okay, let me just try to make sense of the Leonard Sharrow connection here, because it's really fascinating. I had no idea. Então, gente, a Kim está contando a história do fagote nos Estados Unidos, e realmente eu não fazia a mínima ideia do tanto que o fagote francês havia sido presente nos Estados Unidos naquela época, né, nos anos 50 e mais para frente. Então, Leonard Sharrow, que era que tocava em Chicago, ele estudou na Juilliard com o Louis Letellier. O Louis Letellier era o filho do Léon Letellier. Léon Letellier era o dedicatário da Sonata de Saint-Saëns. Então, tá uma conexão muito antiga ali. E o Sharrow, ele começou a tocar fagote num fagote francês, porque esse Louis Letellier, que foi o primeiro professor na Juilliard, o primeiro professor de fagote, ele, obviamente, ensinava fagote francês. E a Kim, ela contou também sobre um fagotista de Porto Rico, que chama Ariel de Busto, e que ele fazia muito freelance, fazia muito cachê, mas também era um grande recitalista. E ele também tocava fagote francês, e ela mostrou essa foto, né, emoldurada ali, que era a foto dele, um recorte de um jornal da época que fala desse recital dele, e críticos falando que era o som de fagote mais alto, mais forte que eles já tinham ouvido. Então tá aí uma moral para o fagote francês, né? A gente sempre pensa, não, fagote alemão, mais forte que nada. E ela estava contando essa história de todos esses grandes fagotistas, né? Leonard Sharrow, o professor Petsy também, e o Kovar, que trocaram, né? Fizeram a transição do fagote francês para o fagote alemão. E contou e tinham fagotes com sistema duplo, sistema híbrido entre o francês e o alemão, enfim, grandes transições. E ela quer contar agora uma história de horror sobre fagotes sendo atropelados ou esmagados debaixo de veículos. Inclusive esse fagote francês desse Ariel, que foi destruído por um trolley, que é um tipo, como se fosse um metrô, só que na superfície, né? Um trem. Como é que chama, gente? Eu esqueci o nome. Socorro, alguém, como é que chama? Bonde. Foi destruído por um bonde. Right. So he had his bassoon destroyed by a trolley. That is disgusting. That's really...
Which brings me to mind when I was at an IDRS conference, because with Gerald Corey and Joanne Simpson, myself and Ron Klimko, and sometimes Chuck Holdeman. Well, we had this bassoon quartet called the North American French Bassoon Quartet. Ooh. And one time, Chuck and I were waiting for Jerry at the top of this hill while he was getting his car from the parking lot, and it was like 45 minutes went by, and I just sort of said something like, "Oh, Jerry, he probably ran over his bassoon," and we laughed. But he had run over a corner of the bassoon.
No.
It was his buffet. I mean, that's what happened.
How?
He forgot to put it in the car.
Oh man. Okay. Wow. Interesting. I
don't know if you want to tell that story, but
yeah, I'm not. It's actually kind of sad.
It relates to French bassoon and the instrument getting,
Right. Existia esse quarteto de fagotes franceses que era formado por ela e mais Joanne Simpson, o Ronald Klimko, e eu esqueci o nome da outra pessoa, mas eles eram esse quarteto de fagotes franceses. Eles estavam tocando numa conferência da International Double Reed Society e estavam esperando o Gerald Corey para ensaiar, ou sei lá, e estava demorando muito, estava demorando, e ela assim, é possível, ele deve ter atropelado o fagote dele. Ela falou na brincadeira, mas havia acontecido de fato, porque o Gerald, ele era meio voado, assim, e ele tinha esquecido de colocar o fagote para dentro do carro. Ele simplesmente deu ré e passou por cima do fagote. And what happened?
I
after
felt
he
so
ran over the bus,
bad.
of course.
Well,
It's
you
not your
know,
fault.
I felt so bad. I felt like, I felt terrible that I said that to Chuck because, I mean, I was pretty close with everybody in the group. So, anyway, we did tell Jerry that I had said that. But in any case, gee, I really miss him. I just started being friends with Chris Millard, and we talked about Jerry a lot. He came to do some master classes and for no money for me and Judith Mendenhall over at Manus, and it was just wonderful. Wonderful to meet him because he's one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, he's great. He was here a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Yeah, I heard.
Yeah.
And well, yeah, that's these are fantastic. Luckily, we are talking about bassoons run over by
Yeah, I'm wondering whether we should go in for questions. Would you like to?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to tell you the story that I just want to mention something that's very important for me to say because I played the bassoon my whole life in various settings, but I want to say that my road was very windy. And I ended up auditioning for my orchestra and getting the job that I have when I was 48 years old. And I think it's important to talk about that because you can still do it.
That's nice to hear.
You can, it's not easy, but also just to keep, to approach the way you learn, to do it in an extremely deliberate way that you can still grow and play better. I want to say that coming out of the corona, this thing, where in New York we were one of the worst places. The first 3 months for me were great because I fixed all the things I hated about my playing that developed from playing in an orchestra that's way too loud, that I could turn myself back into something that I would actually want to hear.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So,
interesting. Ok, gente, nós vamos mudar um pouquinho aqui bruscamente de assunto, né? Eu perguntei para a Kim se ela não gostaria de passar para Gente, para de falar besteira no chat, pelo amor de Deus. Então, perguntei para ela se ela gostaria de compartilhar com a gente que ela conseguiu o emprego atual dela, que é assistente, bem tortuoso, né? E ela teve que se reinventar várias vezes e o processo de aprendizado ele nunca para. Então, ela gostaria de falar para a gente que, principalmente para nós que já estamos bem encaminhados na carreira ou no meio da carreira, que a gente ainda consegue, né, outro emprego, outro trabalho, a gente ainda consegue aprender, ainda consegue mudar de rumo. Então, muito, muito importante essas palavras assim, de encorajamento para todos nós. E está comentando, né, que durante esses 3 primeiros meses de isolamento, de confinamento por causa da Covid, ela conseguiu reverter e consertar muitas coisas no jeito dela de tocar, que ela considera serem cacoetes de orquestra, né, maus hábitos adquiridos em orquestra, como, por exemplo, tocar forte demais o tempo todo. Bom, então vamos lá. Perguntas, pessoal, por favor. Eu vou dar uma revisada no chat aqui, vocês tenham paciência comigo, por gentileza, que eu tô, assim, não sei, quem acompanha as lives desde o início, eu não tô no meu escritório, porque eu descobri que o meu escritório não pega o Wi-Fi direito, então tô na cozinha e sem computador. Então vou revisar o chat aqui. Tá, só um minutinho, deixa eu só revisar aqui rapidex, ver se tem perguntas, se só tem besteira. Tô achando que é só bobagem.
É só bobagem.
É só bobagem mesmo. Então tá, Bruna, vai aí, faz sua pergunta. We're gonna go to questions now, Kim.
Great.
Eu gostaria de saber, assim, no período que ela estava na universidade estudando, se havia outras mulheres se formando em música, não só fagote. Qual era o cenário, assim, da universidade, nesse quesito, nessa questão, quando ela estudava?
Okay, Kim, Bruna would like to know what was the scenario like for women when you were studying at Juilliard and in Paris? How many, like, what was the population? How many
It was
women did you
always
see?
less women, and it still is, because although now there seems, it goes in waves. There were times where there were lots of women, and then there were times where there were not. But in the time that I was there was maybe only 2 women in the entire bassoon class, and at Juilliard we were 22 in the school. In the Paris Conservatory, out of 13, there were 3 women and 10 men.
Então, Bruno, a Kim ela falou que a coisa vai meio que em ondas, assim. Antigamente parece que não tinha tantas mulheres, às vezes tinha muitas, às vezes não tinha. E hoje em dia parece que tem mais, mas nem sempre. E a questão toda, na verdade, ela se estende, né? Não é só quantas mulheres estão estudando, mas é quantas que vão conseguir ir para frente depois de estudar. Mas isso eu já tô viajando, a gente entra nesse assunto daqui a pouco. Mas realmente sempre tem menos mulheres do que homens. Por exemplo, na Juilliard, quando ela estava estudando, eram 22 fagotistas na classe de fagote e só tinham 2 mulheres no total. E em Paris eram 13 no estúdio do Allard e eram só 3 mulheres. Então, realmente menos, né? Kim, I'd like to go a little bit deeper into that question, actually,
Yes.
because it's interesting to know that, so there are fewer women in the bassoon studios worldwide, but then again, the question doesn't end there, because how many of these women will actually manage to have a career after they graduate? How do you see that?
At that time, I had a high school teacher who was a woman, and she worked all the time after she graduated. She was 9 years older than me, but she was really discriminated against, and she lost 2 of the big jobs in town, of course, to a man. She was like the runner-up for the Met and for the Philharmonic, the second bassoon chair. In France, Chantal Collas was the first woman to get a principal job in the Nouvelle Orchestre, which was the second radio orchestra. That was right before I got to the conservatory. Then after I got back from the conservatory, both Judith Leclerc and Trish Rogers won principals of the New York orchestras.
Right.
And then, yes, but when I auditioned for the Philharmonic, I don't think there were no women. I competed against no women. None.
Wow. Okay.
And I was an old woman.
Right. So it's still a very male-dominated industry.
Yes, it is. But in the Philharmonic, we have over 50% women in the orchestra.
Right.
And I also want to say that now we're starting to have more women in the brass, the women are breaking into the brass. But as far as woodwinds are concerned, yeah, it's okay. But it's still in certain sections, it needs to be more.
Right.
Well,
right,
I
right,
think
right.
that, there's so many things. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Então, tá contando aqui que, assim, nessa pergunta que eu fiz para ela, né, sobre e depois, né, depois que estuda, quanto tempo, né, como que as mulheres fagotistas conseguem seguir em frente, né? E ela contou que Chantal Collas, que era fagotista na França, foi a primeira mulher a conseguir entrar, a primeira mulher fagotista a conseguir um emprego no Nouvelle Orchestre, que era uma das orquestras de rádio em Paris na época. Falou que depois, né, nos anos 70, no final dos anos 70, em Nova York, quem ganhou os 2 empregos das orquestras de Nova York foi a Judith LeClaire e a Trish Rogers. São 2 mulheres nos anos 70, mas é uma coisa que vai e vem, né? Por exemplo, quando ela fez a prova para entrar no emprego onde ela está atualmente, ela era a única mulher na prova toda, assim. So you were the only woman in the whole audition process or in the finals?
Well, I don't know who was in it's behind the screen for the first 2 rounds.
Right.
But in the semifinals and in the finals, there were no other women.
Wow. Wow, impressive. Então, ela era realmente a única mulher nas fases finais. Nós temos 2 perguntas aqui. Tem uma pergunta do Eliane e tem uma pergunta do Irã. Irã, você levantou a mão um tempinho atrás, queria te perguntar?
Here.
Ainda não?
Yeah, here.
How's my audio? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for being there, for taking your time for this.
Thank you so much for having me. This is like so exciting for me, really exciting.
And it's thrilling to see exactly that. This is so beautiful to see women taking part more. I mean, in the early music realm, we can see. I come from the early music realm. Exactly the same is happening. So it's really nice in the sense that even there's more women actually. Yeah, strings is like dominated by women. Anyway, I find it nice. That's what I'm saying. When did you first see? Well, in your time when you were a teenager, when was the first time you saw a lady, a woman playing on stage or whatever?
My teacher, Bernadette Zercouli. I went to study with her because I heard she was a great teacher from another student, and she was teaching at the Juilliard Pre-College, and I was going there, and she was playing in the City Opera. That was the opera that Frank Morelli used to play at. And Bernadette, I used to go hear her play in the opera every week. Every week I would hear her play. I would go to the freelance concerts that she would play around town. She played everywhere. She had an all-woman bassoon quartet that made 2 albums, all great players, all great women players, talking to me at that age about the fact that women were not getting as good a deal as they should.
How did you feel about that when she said that as a follow-up?
I knew at that time, you have to understand, I went to high school from 1969 to 1972. I was part of the hippie generation. I was brought up going to protests. I went to
burning your bra.
Well, yeah, but we were more about, at the time that was happening. All that was happening towards the end, because first we were trying to stop the Vietnam War. We were stopping the slaughter of innocent human beings. Then, but the thing is that the women's movement always comes after some other cataclysmic thing. Like for here in the United States, we have Black Lives Matter. And this is really an important thing. It's really changing the whole narrative. So, but then the women who we always, look, I'm going to really be extremely radical because I always am, that women are the most oppressed group of people. Some countries we have it better and some countries we don't. But still, it's always, most of the people that are governing are men. And most of the, so, and we do more work than everybody, and a lot of it's not for pay. I mean, I have a very helpful husband, but still, it's my natural inclination to do certain things because we saw our mothers do them. Or how's all that's going to change? How is that going to change? How are things going to be different? We don't know, but right now we have this window into some worldwide change. I don't know where it's going to leave us, but what's happening now is that we can meet with people all over the world, and we can talk to people that live in places that are completely different than ours. You know, you can have a conversation with somebody who is in Senegal and, you know, talk about, there's some things that are the same and some things that are different. So I think that, you know, isolationism is not a good thing. Definitely. I'm definitely against isolation.
Uau. Thank you, Kim. Então, a pergunta do Irã era sobre a presença, né, como é que ela vê essa presença das mulheres nas orquestras, e ele comentou que nas cordas, né, no meio da música de época, a música antiga, estão surgindo muitas mulheres, principalmente nas cordas. Então, as cordas estão sendo dominadas pelas mulheres, e ele acha ótimo. E ele perguntou para Kim qual foi a primeira vez que ela viu uma fagotista mulher tocando, e a Kim falou que foi a professora dela, a Bernadette Zircoli, que foi... Ela seguia ela, ia assistir ela tocando na ópera de Nova York, na City Opera, e também ia assistir todos os concertos que ela fazia de cachê. E essa Bernadette, ela tinha um quarteto de mulheres mais velhas. Elas tinham um quarteto lá de fagotistas, de mulheres que se apresentavam. Aí foram conversando aqui sobre o que significa para ela, o que significou para ela ter crescido na geração hippie, né? Ela foi adolescente no final dos anos 60, no início dos anos 70, então ela vivia em manifestações, em protestos contra a guerra do Vietnã, para liberdade das mulheres, então isso modelou muito ela como pessoa. E estamos vendo agora, assim, nesse momento bizarro que o mundo está passando, né, o isolamento social, as catástrofes todas que estão acontecendo, o movimento Black Lives Matter nos Estados Unidos, aqui também no Brasil, que está pegando, estamos continuamente desenhando maneiras de mudar como as pessoas... Nossa, tá um pouquinho complicado explicar um pouquinho. Tentando... redesenhar as relações entre as pessoas e o que está desigual, o que precisa melhorar. E ela ressaltou que geralmente as pessoas, a classe de pessoas que tende a ser mais reprimida sempre, independente do contexto, independente do lugar, são as mulheres. E acontece que as mulheres são as pessoas que mais desempenham, mais têm funções e fazem trabalhos, serviços não remunerados. As mulheres sempre trabalham mais, e muitas vezes os trabalhos não remunerados, né? Falando em tarefas domésticas, criação de filhos, e que essa possibilidade que a gente está tendo agora de conversar com pessoas mundo afora, né? É muito importante para a gente entender como que essas relações estão sendo mudadas, alteradas, e como elas são, né, em diferentes lugares. Então, e ela falou também sobre a importância da gente não se fechar, né, a importância de poder comunicar com pessoas que estão longe para entender a realidade e ver o que tem em comum nas realidades do mundo inteiro. Espero não ter massacrado muito a discussão aqui. Thank you, Kim. That's very, very, very important a topic to be discussed. We have a question from Rodrigo, who is in the room. Rodrigo, você está na sala? Você quer fazer a sua pergunta, por favor? E depois tem a pergunta do Elione, que eu esqueci, perdão.
Oi, Caterine, se você puder fazer, por gentileza.
Claro.
Que eu esqueci como eu fiz a pergunta na hora, desculpa. Da forma como eu escrevi, né?
Beleza, eu vou ler aqui então.
Tá bom.
Senhora Laskowski, durante toda a sua carreira profissional numa grande e influente orquestra, quais foram os desafios enfrentados no início de sua carreira na função de fagote assistente E quais recomendações para alunos que estão começando em trabalhos profissionais?
Kim, Rodrigo wants to ask you about the challenges you were met with at the beginning of your career and also as an assistant principal bassoonist. He wants to know how you tackled these challenges and what you would recommend to people who are starting up a career as an orchestral bassoonist.
Well, at the beginning of when I started going on the road that I'm on, which started in my mid-40s, and in around age 43 or 44, I decided to really solve my things that I did not like in my playing. And I went about it in a very deliberate way. So I had to teach myself. I mean, I was already, I was taught very well. I had great training. But I found I faced my weaknesses. I wrote them down, and then I worked on them very systematically. I still work like that to this day. Because you can say, oh, I'm supposed to practice scales. I'm supposed to practice an etude. Yes, you want to practice those things, but why are you doing it? What is weak in your playing that you need to strengthen? So you must face what you are not good at and then improve that.
Ok. Rodrigo, a resposta da Kim é que, assim, quando ela resolveu, como é que eu diria, envergar para o caminho onde ela está atualmente, né, foi já quando ela tinha uns 40, 44 anos, que ela começou a realmente querer se estabelecer de maneira... não que ela não estivesse estabelecida antes, né? Eu não sei se vocês leram um pouquinho a biografia dela, mas também nem sei se não lembro se eu escrevi, mas até os 48 anos de idade, né, até conseguir esse emprego que ela está atualmente na Filarmônica de Nova York, ela era ela fazia cachê e muitos, era estável, né? Era tipo, fazia vários contratos, tinha vários contratos em vários lugares diferentes, e não era tipo um contrato fixo com uma orquestra, não. Então, quando ela decidiu que ela queria se estabelecer realmente com um emprego fixo em um lugar, ela começou a observar o que ela não gostava na maneira dela tocar e começou a se auto-ensinar como resolver esses problemas. Ela falou que ela teve ótimos professores, né, que o treinamento dela com professores foi excelente, mas que chegando nessa fase da vida dela, aos 40, ela resolveu atacar, né, muito sistematicamente os defeitos que ela achava que ela tinha como fagotista. Então, ela teve que se dar aula. E como é que ela fez isso, né? Como é que a gente se dá aula? Desenvolvendo um sistema, isso observando e sendo muito honesta, né? Observando o que era bom, o que não era bom e desenhando maneiras de corrigir. Então, por exemplo, eu deveria tocar escalas, eu deveria tocar estudos, ok. Mas por quê? Qual que é o propósito de tocar escalas? Qual que é o propósito de tocar estudos? Então, fazer isso, se observando e tendo muito senso crítico, autocrítica e uma consciência muito aguçada quando se toca fagote. Então, bom, não é uma resposta exatamente direta à sua pergunta, né, de o que recomenda a fagotistas em início de carreira, mas acho que essa questão da consciência, quando a gente toca, é uma coisa para se levar para a vida toda, né? Não tocar fagote de qualquer maneira, sempre tocar consciente e sempre se observar e saber identificar o que pode melhorar e quais são as nossas forças e nossas fraquezas. Respondeu, Rodrigo?
Muito obrigado, Caterine. Obrigado. Agradeço.
Nada. Ok.
What the most important thing that anyone ever said to me was when Maurice Allard said to me, and I was devastated when he said it. He said, "You do not assimilate fast enough. You do not learn fast enough. Well, that was pretty demoralizing. I actually stopped playing the bassoon for 2 years after I got back from Paris. That's it. Should say that. Tell it.
Yeah, absolutely. Rodrigo, ela continuou respondendo aqui que a frase mais marcante que ela já ouviu de um professor veio de Maurice Talard. Ele falou para ela, você não aprende rápido o suficiente. Foi um golpe duro, né, para ela. Ela ficou devastada com aquilo. Foi uma coisa muito desagradável de se ouvir, a ponto dela desistir de tocar fagote durante 2 anos depois que ela voltou de Paris. Bom, agora vou deixar ela continuar.
When I, the older I got, the more I knew. I used to think I knew what he meant, but how I interpret it now, and it's so great, is that I have to teach myself. I have to figure out how to learn it, how to learn this stuff. Because we have to know how we learn, and then or devise a way that's the right way for us to learn. And then you'll be learning fast enough. I can learn anything in so fast now. But I didn't really have enough information about how to do that when I was 22 years old. I was a good player, and I could really do things that a lot of other people couldn't do, but there were some things I could not do so well. So I figured out how to teach myself how to do those things. For example, when I was substituting with the New York City Ballet, they wouldn't give me a rehearsal. I had to come in and sight read the stuff. So I would learn it. I would have rehearsals by myself with a recording. I'd study the piece to the point where I felt like I played it 100 times in my life. I made sure that I knew exactly everything that was going on. So I devised a system for myself. And it worked out very well, because I did end up getting a job with them, just because my skill at learning things so fast had improved, just by somebody saying that one thing to me at some point in my life, set up, how can I use this creatively?
Ok. Então, Rodrigo, essa frase, né, que o Maurice Talard falou para ela, você não aprende rápido o suficiente, ela ficou assim, maturando, né, amadurecendo esse pensamento durante a vida dela e refletindo muito sobre essa necessidade de aprender a aprender, de descobrir como que ela conseguiria, como é que era o jeito dela aprender as coisas, aprender a fazer funcionar, né, a música. Então, um exemplo disso, que ela precisou, né, dessa frase, que é você não aprende rápido o suficiente, ou transformando colocando isso no positivo, você precisa aprender rapidamente, foi quando ela era chamada com frequência para trabalhar com o balé da cidade de Nova York. Eles não davam para ela a oportunidade de ensaiar com a orquestra, era chegar e tocar já no concerto. E assim, o balé de Nova York, a gente conversou um pouco antes, ela estava me contando que era chegar e tocar o Pássaro de Fogo sem ensaios, não era musiquinha simples, não. Então, o jeito que ela desenvolveu de aprender essas coisas era auto-ensaiar, né? Ela ensaiava com ela mesma, ouvindo muito a gravação e estudando a música e tocando junto com a gravação, até ela ter a impressão que ela tinha tocado várias vezes, né? Centenas de vezes, antes de chegar nas apresentações. Então, é isso, assim, descobrir como você aprende, isso é muito importante, né, para nós, para todo mundo também, e principalmente para quem está começando, né, quem está nesse meio mundo entre a faculdade e a profissão, e também para quem está estudando. Agora é isso, se observar para você entender o que funciona para você, né, não tem um jeito certo de aprender as coisas, não. Mas muitas vezes a gente pode ser levado a achar que não tem um jeito certo de aprender a música. Não é verdade, não. Você precisa se observar sempre para descobrir o que te faz entender o processo de aprender uma partitura e de tocar fagote. Right. We have another question. We have a request from Elione Medeiros. He is a bassoonist in Rio de Janeiro. He wants to know how you feel about playing the French bassoon.
Well, I love it. It was difficult for me because it's so close to the German bassoon, yet it's not. And the reeds were different, and the fingerings were slightly different, and the keys were quite a bit different, but sort of the same. But I love the sound of it. But the thing is, when I heard somebody play it up close, it didn't sound the same way that it did on recordings. And they have some really great recording engineers at France Radio at that time. And any bassoon recording that you hear that is the sound is really beautiful and sounds expansive has been recorded in a good hall with a good recording engineer. Or if you're listening to somebody play a recital and the hall is really good, it's going to sound great. For me, I've discovered that everything is related to acoustics. And and it's not actually, some people have really beautiful sounds, okay? And some people have sounds that are okay. And sometimes the people who have sounds that are okay are playing more interesting music than some of the people that are just having like this beautiful sound. So I would get very seduced by a sound, but it's real. I discovered later on in life, it was really the music that was affecting me. So if I felt that something was I was really feeling it when somebody was playing, it always had to do with their expression, their emotional delivery. So I found that, I had to go back to playing the German bassoon, that I ended up being able to do what I wanted to do on the German bassoon anyway. I didn't really need to switch instruments, but I really loved playing the French bassoon, and I still love it.
Ótimo, thank you, Kim. Então, Elione, sobre ainda tocar, sobre como ela se sente com o fagote francês, ela adora, né? A primeira coisa que ela falou, I love it, eu amo tocar fagote francês. É tudo diferente, mas é tudo meio igual, né? A palheta é diferente, os dedilhados são um pouco diferentes, o som é um pouco diferente, mas é um fagote, né? E das coisas que espantou ela é que ela se deu conta que quando você chegava perto de um fagote francês, não soava igual uma gravação, né? As gravações que ela tinha ouvido. Porque na época tinham, nas orquestras de rádio francesas, tinham engenheiros de som incríveis que faziam milagres, apesar... Claro que o mérito não é só dos engenheiros, né? Os grandes fagotistas são grandes fagotistas. Se você ouve qualquer gravação da época, é tudo maravilhoso, né? E ela se deu conta, com o passar dos anos, que o que mais influencia é a acústica. Ela tem uma relação muito grande muito importante com a acústica do lugar. Um grande fagotista tocando recital numa boa sala sempre vai ser muito agradável de ouvir. E ela falou dessa coisa do som maravilhoso, né? Uma pessoa que tem um som muito bonito e uma pessoa que toca muito bonito não necessariamente vai ser por causa de um som maravilhoso, não é... Tem pessoas que têm um som lindo e que tocam de maneira chata, tem pessoas que tocam chato e que tocam muito interessante com um som nem tão bonito, enfim. no final das contas, o que cativa ela é a musicalidade, a expressividade das pessoas, não é necessariamente aquela busca por um som X, Y, Z. É a expressividade no tocar. Então, assim, quando ela fala que não tem muito essa questão de entre o fagote francês ou o fagote alemão, ela constatou que, independentemente de qual ela estivesse tocando, ela conseguiria carregar, né, o sentido, a expressão, né, não é o instrumento que define isso, não é, realmente é o músico, a musicista. Temos uma pergunta do Mauro. We have a question from Mauro. Kim, Mauro, você quer fazer a sua pergunta ou você quer que a gente faça? Vamos embora, você está aqui, só abra aí o microfone, vai.
Pleasure, Miss Kim.
Hi.
No, the question I wrote for her, but I suppose I was writing to everyone, but it was specific for her. If she still plays the French bassoon sometimes, so she answered me, yes, I do.
Yeah, sometimes I do. I made a video for the New York Philharmonic. It hasn't come out yet. But where I play a little bit, it wasn't really a video for playing too much, but I had to do some little bits. So I played the German bassoon in it, but I also played something on the French bassoon. And I did play a concert at the IDRS convention in 2014 with the what was it, the North American French Bassoon Quartet with Joanne Simpson, me, and some other people. And yes, I mean, with the amount of practicing that I have to do on the German bassoon, I just don't have enough time, you know, between playing an orchestra and at the Philharmonic, my position is associate principal, which means that I share the concert with Judith, or if she's off, I'm playing a lot, you know, I play maybe over 50% of the time. And I have to learn all of her music too, because if she gets sick, I have to be ready to come in and play. So I have really much more music to learn than anybody in the section. Plus I was teaching at 3 schools, but now I'm teaching at just 2. And yeah, we have 140 concerts a year. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Uau.
Yeah.
Ok. Uau. Então, gente, o Mauro perguntou para ela se ela ainda toca fagote francês. Ela respondeu que, às vezes, né, ela gosta de tocar. Ela fez um vídeo recentemente para a Filarmônica de Nova York, onde ela toca um pouquinho de fagote alemão, um pouquinho de fagote francês. Mas a rotina da Filarmônica de Nova York não permite, né? Uma rotina brutal. São 140 concertos por ano. E ela ainda, além de ela mesma aprender as partes que são dela, ela também tem que aprender todas as partes da fagotista principal, que é a Judith Leclerc, porque a função do fagote assistente lá e em vários lugares, né, aqui também, é de substituir, né, em caso de emergência. Então, é muita música para aprender no fagote alemão, e também ela dá aula em 2 instituições, eram 3, agora são 2. Então, realmente, por questões de tempo, essa rotina não permite, não, realmente, que ela se dedique mais ao fagote francês. Nós temos 2 perguntas. Uma pergunta sobre Cannes. Richard, what is your question? Richard, are you here?
It's okay. Just have to turn my microphone on.
Good.
First, I have to apologize. I came on late to this session, and I think I missed a lot of very good conversation. But I came in the middle as you were talking about French bassoons. And though I have never had the pleasure of studying on a French bassoon, I've always loved it. It was one of my first heroes. You know, when I started getting interested in bassoon, Maurice Allard, his recordings I thought were just fantastic. In the discussion that you had it been mentioned that for something like 32 years, the bassoon section in Boston was led by a French bassoon?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, it was the uncle of Maurice Allard, who was
yes.
Raymond Allard. But
Yeah.
the second bassoonist was a guy named Ernst Panenka.
I knew him.
I knew Ernst too. I played next to him in Tanglewood when the TMC orchestra, you know, but their tradition was very French, and you know, all along the East Coast, basically it was that. You know, I'd say except for like the Philadelphia Orchestra, who had a German guy, Walter Gedda. You know, he was. There was really a lot of French influence, I believe. You know, people like Longy came in, and yeah, there were just a lot of French musicians.
Yes. Okay. So you did cover that. What was I going to say? Oh, when I was in high school and started playing bassoon, the high school I went to in Connecticut had a couple of bassoons, and two of them were buffets.
No kidding. What town was that?
Stanford.
Stanford, really? I have a lot of
Yeah.
friends that play in Stanford Symphony.
I was principal long time ago, and then played later with them a couple times.
Wow.
But yeah, that
Yes.
was like in the 60s.
What is your last name?
Kandetsky.
Ah.
I stopped playing a long time ago, and I live in Brazil now. But did you know Joyce Kelly?
Yes, I did.
She was my principal teacher.
Wow. I played with her at the beginning of my freelance career. I did play with her a bunch. Yeah.
Okay.
Did you know Lou Lazzarini?
Yes. Yeah.
Lou is the grandfather of my son's fiance.
Small world.
And it's funny because a student of mine just won a position in Hartford Symphony, where Lou used to play. Lou used to play with Barry Stees there.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I lived for 30 years in Hartford.
Cool.
But okay. Okay, this is very not interesting to other people, I think.
But it's nice talking to you.
It's really cool. It's really cool to see
To have a
how-
person. It's so great that you're at the meeting. I mean, it's great.
Yes. Do you know T.D. Ellis?
Yes, of course.
Well, he was Joyce Kelly's son-in-law.
Oh, I think I knew that. Oh my goodness.
So what I've noticed here is that everyone plays German bassoon, but there is such a nostalgia for French bassoon.
Let me just say one thing about French bassoon. Uberdus. Now, Uberdus was a guy who is probably one of the earliest recorded bassoonists, and I had a record when I was a kid of Uberdus playing the second concerto of Mozart. Now, this is a spurious and doubtful work.
Probably
Uberdus.
Debian.
I knew Uberdus, okay? I knew him. I met him because I was at the Nice Festival. He stopped playing the bassoon and became a conductor. I want to say that those early recordings, and let me give you, this is good information. The Bibliothèque Nationale of France has a website called gallica.bn.fr, gallica.bn.fr, something like that. It's part of the Bibliothèque Nationale. You can find recordings of people like Uberdus and listen to them on the site. It's just so great to hear that. And because all of those trios that were written for, you know, the trio d'Anche, like the Martinu, the Ibert, all those old trios. He had a very famous, the Trio d'Anche de Paris. And there are nice recordings that you can listen to on the Bibliothèque Nationale site. And it's bad. Sometimes I'm ripping those recordings off and putting them on the hard drive of my bassoon. That bad? They're not under copyright or anything, but
no, it's not
I have
bad.
to have those things because those guys, Overdose was really an artist, not so much Gustave Durand. I didn't really think but Paul Onya, who I also knew, and Paul Onya was he was the contrabassoonist of the Paris Opera, but he was also a really great bassoon player, and there are many solo recordings like the Mozart Concerto and Weber and a lot of stuff like that.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I'm really a Francophile, although I couldn't find that I could live in France because if you're from New York City, it's very hard to live somewhere else, but I think I'm going to try one day. But I just want to say that this historical part of bassoon is really so interesting to me. I'm a total bassoon nerd when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Okay, Catherine, did you get the link for those recordings?
I did. Yeah, more or less. I think we're gonna try. We need a webmaster to do that for us because I'm only on the cell phone.
Yeah,
Vivian.
I'll try to send stuff to you that you can share with people.
Sure. Yeah, that would be great.
Of great stuff. I want to say something to Hiram, that you're doing Baroque bassoon, because I really like my students to listen to bassoonists that play period instruments when they're studying this Baroque stuff. And I do a lot of work with them in relation to that and as examples. And, I'm just saying, I'm very into it.
An honor that you listen to us at all. That's
all the time. Let me tell you something. I was giving a class because we had to teach chamber music. We had to teach chamber music online. How do you do that? So if I was doing pieces like Mozart Piano Quintet and also the serenades of Mozart, I would only make them bring period instrument performances of these things. And we sat and discussed. I just had to tell you that.
Thank you.
That's great. That's great. It's really interesting that you bring that up, actually, Kim. The part of...
Tem que traduzir tudo isso, porque a galera
Eu vou.
I'm still on the call, honey, so I can't talk to you right now.
Então, o Richard, ele perguntou sobre... Perguntou mais um pouquinho, né? Reacendeu um pouco a discussão sobre o fagote francês, e o que a Kim falou, vou falar bem resumidamente, né? Porque rolou uma conversa bem extensa. Que a tradição francesa, do fagote francês na costa leste dos Estados Unidos, ela foi bem presente, né? Teve durante décadas fagotistas franceses na orquestra de Boston, por exemplo. Então, realmente foi uma influência muito grande. E ele perguntou para ela a impressão que ela tem sobre essa nostalgia que nós temos a respeito do fagote francês, né? E ela começou a falar do Bradu, Fernand Bradu, que deixou esses métodos incríveis, mas também obras mesmo, música mesmo, e, enfim, dispararam a conversar sobre fagote francês, Gustave Perrin, Ferdinand Bradu e tal. E ela jogou aqui, ela falou de um site que é da Bibliothèque Nationale de France, onde tem gravações desses grandes fagotistas, né, do século passado. Então ela vai mandar o link para a gente acessar essas gravações todas. E no final ela falou uma coisa para o Irã, né, sobre fagote barroco, que ela está tendo que dar aula de música de câmara online agora. Como é que faz, né, para dar aula de música de câmara online? Não tem muito jeito, né? Você manda os seus alunos ouvirem gravações e depois todo mundo ouve a mesma coisa e volta para a aula e para discutir as gravações que ouviram, porque obviamente não dá para tocar juntos. E ela diz que nesse processo ela tem gostado muito de indicar gravações em instrumentos de época, por exemplo, das serenatas de Mozart, que ela mandou os alunos procurarem gravações com informações de época, né, gravadas no estilo. Bom, muito bem. E aí eu ia enganchar no assunto pensar sobre tocar, porque um grande defeito da educação musical é concentrar no tocar. E a gente não pensa, né? E o que tem acontecido, eu acho que esse Corona Bassoons é um exemplo, inclusive, é que como a gente não está mais conseguindo se encontrar para tocar, a gente está tendo que pensar sobre o que a gente faz, né? Pensar sobre a carreira. It's really interesting, Kim, that you brought that up, the teaching that we're having to do now is very much centered on thinking about music and thinking about what we do, because obviously we can't get together right now, so we're forced to sort of redirect our energy to the thinking bits and to the sort of introspective aspects of playing the bassoon and of playing music. And I think that's really it's really interesting that we are able to observe now that we normally get so caught up in playing, the act of playing, that we don't think as much as maybe we should about the music that we make.
The thinking is more important.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about it, because look, you could say you should use this, play this kind of instrument, use this kind of machine, play this kind of reed. Yeah. Okay, there's so many ways to do the same thing. And everything changes because you can't just give your reed to somebody. They're going to have to adjust it because their pressure is different. Okay. So yes, you have to teach somebody the basics, how they can, basically, it's all for art. It's all for, like, it's never to be perfect. As Allard said, you practice all this stuff, the end is not perfection. The end is expression. Okay? The end is he said in a speech he gave in 1976, Joe Polisi had him out to Yale. He said, technique is not a means to an end, but it's a very important means. So you have to practice a lot of technique. All he did was practice his whole life. But if you feel comfortable with what you're doing, you're going to be able to express.
Excellent.
And sometimes I think it's more important to go to it from, you could say, practice all this stuff and you're going to be good enough to do it. No, you have to start with the music making right away.
Absolutely. Então, sobre essa questão, né, de pensar sobre o fazer musical, ela falou que decididamente pensar é mais importante do que sentar e tocar. Obviamente, tocar é importante, estudar, né, técnica é muito importante, mas a gente precisa pensar muito mais. E o Maurice Allard dizia que o fim, né, o objetivo não é a perfeição. Você não estuda escalas, você não estuda as peças todas para conseguir perfeição. Perfeição não é o objetivo, não. O objetivo é a expressão, é a expressividade. E que, assim, a técnica, apesar de ser importante, ela não é um meio para um fim. A técnica, ela é importante, mas não é não é exatamente, não é a solução em si. Obviamente que quanto mais você é confortável com o instrumento, com a técnica do instrumento, mais fácil vai ser carregar uma emoção, né, transmitir. Mas a técnica sozinha não resolve, não, e que daí é muito importante começar pelo fazer musical, tocar de maneira expressiva sempre, né, procurar ser expressivo sempre. Kim, you spoke briefly about machines and reeds and cane, and I think I'd like to, gosh, it's almost 5 o'clock. I can't believe it. This has
Yeah.
gone so fast. It has gone by so fast, but I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your cane, because I think it's a fabulous story. Vai contar pouquinho pra gente da cana dela.
So when we were doing fixing a part of the house in Greece, we had a pergola, and it was made from cane, and we had to cut a piece off. So we said, oh, maybe we can use that for reeds. So now I just order a pergola or two every summer, and I bring it back. I'm telling you that, wait.
Gente, é isso. Ela descobriu essa cana na Grécia quando ela estava fazendo reforma num pergolado.
I have like a gigantic plastic box inside that closet over there. And then,
Não tá de brincadeira não, Bertão. Vocês que estão na Europa aí, dá um pulinho na Grécia, encomenda um pergolado e vai lá ser feliz.
You're my new hero, sweetie.
Listen, I could tell you how to do the whole thing. You know, first of all, you got to know how to pick out the cane. And there are ways to do this stuff that you don't have to like buy all these machines to hardness test. I have a hardness tester because somebody sold me one it was part of a package deal with a tool. But I have all these ways of just feeling the cane and sticking implements in it to test, is it going to be good or not, right? I don't make reeds a lot, but I always have new good reeds because most of my reeds come out. And so I gouge. Gouging is good. Here's a nice gouging machine. Okay. And I have a tip profiler. I have like a lot of machines in back of where my computer is that you're seeing. It's just like, it's full of everything. You can see all this stuff, right? All this stuff. Read stuff everywhere, machines, and I just don't slave over reeds a lot because I have a way where I just throw a lot of cane out. And you know, you throw a lot out and you make sure that you do there's certain things you got to get the thickest part of the cane into the center of your reed. And after that, you just scrape in certain places and measure on the dynamometer, and you're usually going to come out with a reed. It's not rocket science.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Kim. Então, gente, seguinte, a Kim, ela compra a cana dela na Grécia e não é de um fornecedor chique de cana para fagote nem para oboé, não. Ela se deu conta, quando estava fazendo reforma de um pergolado lá, né, tipo uma varanda, que esse pergolado ele era feito de cana. Ela falou, olha só, deixa eu ver se essa cana serve para fazer palheta de fagote. Acontece que serve perfeitamente. Então, o que ela faz toda vez que ela vai para a Grécia, na casa deles lá? Ela encomenda um pergolado 2, né? Eles vêm em kits, eles vendem os negócios em kit, igual você compra um kit para fazer uma, sei lá, uma cabana para o cachorro, assim, vende um kit. Aí lá vende um kit para fazer pergolado feito de cana e compra lá. E ela vai observando os pedaços de cana e descartando o que não vai prestar e guardando o material que vai ser bom para fazer palheta. Obviamente tem que medir o diâmetro do tubo e tudo mais. Mas aí é muito engraçado o que ela falou, né? Porque para ela fazer palhetas não é assim, não é neurociência, não é nada misterioso, não. Ela tem as máquinas todas para fazer a cana, para raspar, para goivar e tudo mais. Mas eu tô olhando para fora porque eu tô vendo o chat explodindo com brincadeiras, eu vou perder o fio da meada aqui. Ela tem esses instrumentos para formar a cana, para montar as palhetas realmente, mas essas medidores de dureza, de densidade e tudo mais, ela tem, mas ela não usa não. O que ela acaba fazendo é que ela vai descartando muita cana, descartando muita palheta, se não serve, joga fora, simplesmente. E, sim, obviamente faz isso sem tanto pudor, porque a cana dela é baratinha. Então, fica aí a dica. Para quem está na Europa, principalmente, gente, dá um pulinho na Grécia, compra um pergolado, traz pra gente, por favor. Vamos ver que perguntas são essas. Bater papo, 13 mensagens. Tem pergunta. Tem pergunta do Bertão. Vai, Bertão.
Vamos lá. Hi, I'm trying to put some myself together after this information of Greek, and I really lost it. The thing is, you are a New Yorker. You live in a very diverse musical town, and you have lots of wonderful institutions of music, such as the Broadway, the City Opera, Ballet, and Philharmonic, and the opera also. And I would like to know, how do you see the role of the New York Philharmonic in this diverse town?
I think
what is the new?
I think we're going to take the lead. I think we're going to try to take the. I mean, we're already trying to. You know, we have many projects that we're doing remotely. And if you go to our site, you can see that we've had many initiatives, and we're about to record a piece. I have to go print up the part and learn it, by Valerie Coleman. We've done quite a bit of things, and so we're going with it. We're going to try our best, and I think it's going to be a big thing. We were already having a fantastic thing when the coronavirus hit for women. It was a year of, from 1919 to now. The 19 is 100 years ago was the fire in the Shirtwaist Company, where all these people, all these women died, and we were having a year we were presenting 19 new works of women. That was a huge thing, and then it got interrupted by this, and now not only do we have to finish out that the women women composers thing, but we have a lot of new things added, and yes, we will be doing that. It's a very big part of our agenda.
Oh, that's really fun to hear. I'd like also to perhaps I'm mistaken, but the thing is, one of the most wonderful works I heard in the last decade, it was the Transmigration of the Souls by John Adams, and I think it's such a huge thing for you to be able to deal with such a huge impact in the city through such a magnificent work. Would you talk a little about John Adams and these new composers, these great composers of America?
Well, I played that was the first concert I ever did with the Philharmonic after I got my job, was Transmigrations of Souls. I want to say that John Adams is something really incredible. He's great to work with. He's very funny. You should, I don't know if you visit his website sometimes, but he's very witty. His music has everything in it. And he has spanned a lot of different styles and still maintained the minimalistic thing. I don't know what to say about him, except that I'm a huge fan and that I always want to do his music. And I feel one thing that I feel is really great about John Adams is that was very influenced by the television composers of the 1950s and 60s. And there was really a lot of incredible music going on in some of those television shows. So when I'm playing John Adams, I feel like he really is paying a tribute to some of those fantastic composers who that was the only way they could get their music played, was working in the studios.
Excellent.
Oh,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Gente, eu acho que eu não entendi a pergunta do Bertão, então eu vou fazer um pouquinho de engenharia reversa aqui. Eu não sei onde você tá, Bertão, mas tá a criançada atrás de você, que eu não tô entendendo o que você tá falando, não.
Cristo, tem uma creche aqui onde é maravilhoso. Olha, as crianças são adoráveis, mas hoje é dia de ver a vovó, então é assim. Então aqui na cozinha, desculpa.
Conta pra gente qual foi sua pergunta. Eu acho que eu consigo fazer a engenharia reversa, mas eu preferiria não fazer.
A pergunta é como ela vê o papel da Filarmônica de Nova York dentro de uma cidade que tem tantas instituições musicais tão importantes como a Broadway, balé, ópera, tem várias óperas diferentes, e qual o papel da Filarmônica? Acho que... E aí ela já começou a responder e eu cortei o microfone da creche.
Ok. Tá bom. Então, o Bertão, né, revelou a pergunta dele, a resposta da Kim foi um pouquinho na tangente, mas achei muito interessante, né? Porque ela falou que a Filarmônica de Nova York está assumindo um papel de liderança. E principalmente agora, nessa situação, né, com o coronavírus, eles estão desenvolvendo muitos projetos, e um dos projetos mais importantes, né, como é que eu diria? Mais importantes mesmo. Eles começaram em 2019, que era uma homenagem aos acontecimentos de 100 anos atrás, quando aconteceu um incêndio na fábrica que matou aquele monte de mulheres e deu origem ao Dia Nacional da luta pela igualdade das mulheres. Então, eles encomendaram 19 novas obras de compositoras mulheres, e aí estavam acontecendo esses concertos, essas estreias, e foi interrompido pela crise do coronavírus, mas estão no processo de viabilizar isso online. Então, eles têm uma peça nova agora de uma compositora que é Valerie. What's her name? Sorry, que é my friend.
Valerie Coleman.
Valerie Coleman.
If you go to the Philharmonic site, you're going to see they'll announce like stuff we're doing. We have to make our recording, and then they're going to smush it all together.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's a difficult process that. Eles vão então fazer esse processo, né, de gravar cada um em sua casa, e depois eles vão fazer essa mixagem gigantesca, né, da orquestra toda, para fazer uma estreia completamente online de uma peça nova. Então, realmente bastante desafiador. Bertão, você teve uma segunda fase aí, eu perdi o fio completamente. I lost track of the second half of that discussion there.
It was about John Adams and
right.
You know, basically John Adams is great, and he is great.
He's great.
Look, I didn't think that he was great, and then one time I was in California, and somebody who really doesn't like anything said, "You gotta listen to this," and they put on Nixon in China. I'm like,
we played the Chairman dances here last year.
True. It's a standard now. But really what about the airplane going on? Like John Adams, he writes a part where the airplane is taking off. You know, at the ballet, we used to play this piece called, A Fearful Symmetries. It was a beautiful ballet with these scarves and stuff like that. But the music is so great. Fearful Symmetries. You should listen to that.
Okay, cool.
Thank you for that. Eu estava perguntando de uma peça em especial do John Adams, que é maravilhosa, é uma super catarse sobre um momento muito traumático da experiência de Nova York, que é uma peça que ele fez comissionada pela Filarmônica de Nova York, e se chama On the Transmigrations of the Souls, e é uma homenagem ao 11 de setembro. E é um negócio maravilhoso, uma orquestra gigantesca, coro duplo, coro infantil, gravação, e todo mundo que está no lugar se distrai, porque é bem forte. Né?
Não, incrível, incrível. Então, essa parte da interação deles, né, sobre o compositor John Adams, Kim falou que, assim, John Adams é um super compositor, muito maravilhoso. Ela não gostava da música dele a princípio, mas ela foi, né, alguém aplicou para ela a peça Fearful Symmetries. E aí ela virou a chave, você começou a gostar. E ela fala que uma parte muito interessante, né, da história da música e da composição musical nos Estados Unidos é que muitas das grandes obras, né, dos grandes compositores da produção musical dos anos 50 e 60 era música de televisão. Então tem muita música muito interessante oriundo de lá, e que ela tem essa impressão que o John Adams ele bebe muito nessa fonte. Ok, gente, 5:10. Eu não quero ir embora, não, mas acho que está na hora. Kim, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really great to do this, and I really, thanks. It's just beautiful. It's
wonderful
to meet you all, and now, yeah. More connection. That's there's a book by E.M. Forster called A Passage to India, and it's about people, being dissociated, different levels of society, and also, colonists and the people that, that are being oppressed by the colonists. Anyway, the one phrase that keeps coming back all the time in that book is connect, only connect.
Great. That sounds like that's really great advice. Então, despedindo da gente aqui, me agradeceu pela presença nossa e pelo convite, e mencionou um livro do Ian Foster que fala muito sobre isso, esse tema de conexão, né? Que a gente precisa se manter conectados uns com os outros. Então, vamos continuar fazendo isso aqui, né, enquanto a gente não puder se encontrar fisicamente, também além, por favor, né? Próxima live, nossa, Vivian, por favor.
Pronto, vou falar as próximas 3 lives. A gente tem live com a Jacqueline Wilson, com o André Januário, opa, eu esqueci de falar a data. Jacqueline Wilson vai ser dia 13, André Januário vai ser dia 14 e Felipe Castro dia 16.
Muito bom, obrigada, Vivian. Gente, valeu pela presença hoje. Uma salva de palmas para Kim Leskovsky, por favor.
Bravo.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Love to everybody.
Be safe.
Brava.
Bye, guys.
Have a good trip. Have a good trip to Greece. Bring us some cane.
I'm going to bring look, I'm paying for an extra suitcase to bring back cane. It's still going to pay for itself, right?
Of course.
It costs $30.